"No," she screamed, managing to get up as she ran toward the heap of sand and started digging with her hands. She was wailing and digging simultaneously, ignoring the scorching sun shining directly on her head. Her daughter rushed to her, also wailing, and tried stopping her, but she pushed her away countless times as she continued digging. "Mommy, please, let's go," her daughter said amid tears, too scared to even come close to her. "I'm not leaving here till I dig out my husband," she declared, still digging. "Oh God, show yourself. The Lion of Judah, arise and show yourself. The mighty in battle, just as Christ arose on the third day, I believe in your miracles. Just as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego made it out of the fire alive, just as Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, and he made it out alive without even a scratch on his skin. Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered. Dig up this grave, O Jehovah Nissi, and bring out my husband alive without a scratch on his skin. Arise, El Shaddai, and bring my son back to me wherever he is. Just as it is written in your word that you will fight our battle, and we shall hold our peace in Exodus 14:14. This battle is yours, O Lord. I can't fight it alone. Let these people know that you sent us here. We didn't send ourselves," she lamented, digging deep into the grave. But how deep could she go? Her daughter managed to stagger forward again and gave her a tight hug, the type of hug that she couldn't resist. She had to rest her head on her daughter's shoulder, and they both wailed bitterly together. They remained there until night, but God sent them light in the form of the full moon. It shone so bright that the whole place ended up looking like it was morning. She just couldn't bear to leave her husband all alone there. And then they began to hear footsteps. They both looked up suddenly, and it turned out to be Layla. She was panting heavily as she approached, and she fell to the ground before them, but got up and started looking around. "What is it? What's wrong?" At this time, the woman questioned, her red and swollen eyes popping. "Ma! Ma!" Layla called in exclamation, still looking around and panting. "Talk to me," the woman yelled. "Ma, the king's men are already on their way here. He said he didn't send anyone here to tell the guards who dug the grave not to bury you people alongside. As I speak, they are on their way here to bury you and your daughter," Layla explained, causing the woman's jaw to drop in awe. "The king got to hear about the whole story this night and how you weren't buried alongside, and asked the guards to find you both and bury you," she added. Then they started to hear voices from afar. Her daughter suggested they run away from there, but "Never," the woman declared. "This is the time for God to prove himself. If he's truly alive and on his throne, then he should prove himself. We came here to spread his word, but look how we are being treated instead." "Ah, there they are. Arrest them and dig a grave for both of them," one of the elders who followed them back there said, pointing at them. "Isn't that Layla? Do you want to be buried alongside?" the man thundered, now pointing at Layla. "If that's what the living God wants, then so be it," she said, surprisingly shocking everyone present. "Leave there, my friend. I must report you to your parents because I don't understand the kind of relationship you have with these people," another said. And then 2 guards approached them with shovels, and all of a sudden, a ring of fire appeared around the 3 of them, and the guards quickly retreated. Some ran away from there, while some who wanted to really know how the fire came about stayed with folded arms and mouths agape. Layla, the daughter, and the woman stood in the ring of fire looking around. None of them could tell where the fire came from, but the woman knew her God had arisen. For certainly he had made the pillar of cloud during the day and the pillar of fire at night. The guards, after standing there and watching with mouths agape for a few minutes, disappeared one after the other until the last guard left. Some of the elders who were still around stood staring at them, all shocked. "What is this?" they asked each other in whispers as they couldn't stop staring. And just like the guards, they disappeared, running after each other like children fleeing from danger. As soon as they left, the fire went out. "Ma, we need to get out of here," Layla said, looking around. "Not without my husband," the woman said, bursting into another round of tears. "Mom, please, this is the chance God gave us to escape from here. Didn't you see the fire he sent to stop them from burying us alive? It wouldn't be wise to remain here. I believe God will perform his wonders. Let's just leave," her daughter pleaded. "And how do we intend to do that? Without the car?" the woman questioned. "God will make a way," her daughter assured her. They got up, but it was too difficult to leave her husband behind. She wept bitterly as her daughter wouldn't stop pulling her hand so they could leave. She had no choice but to leave and let God be the judge. They ran as fast as they could, taking the back road. When they got to one of the junctions leading to the village, she asked Layla to return home. Layla initially refused, but agreed when she persisted. Layla cried, turning around to look at them as she walked away. Though the woman and her daughter couldn't stop crying, they waited for a few more minutes to be sure Layla had walked past the bushy junction before proceeding to their unknown destination. The woman and her daughter took the other route and ran as fast as they could for about 30 minutes, resting, panting, and racing again until they arrived at the other village. Everywhere was already quiet, and she was terrified. If we proceed from here, who knows if we will make it home alive? It's better to see if we can spend the night here rather than proceeding, she said, looking around. Here? How? Her daughter asked. We don't even know anybody here. Let's walk down a little. Maybe we will find an abandoned house or an uncompleted building. It's better spending the night there than in these demonic village houses, she said, grabbing her daughter's hand as they journeyed through the paths alone. They had only walked for a few minutes, turning and looking around, when they began to hear the voice of someone praying at the top of his voice. The woman and her daughter turned their heads to look at each other. Is that a human being or a spirit? Her daughter asked. I don't think it's a spirit. Come, the woman said, and they started to trace the voice. It was coming from a bungalow beside the road. They knocked on the door of the building, and the person paused immediately. Who is it? They heard him question. Good evening, sir. The woman and her daughter greeted together, but he didn't respond. They waited for about 20 seconds, hoping he would open up. But he didn't. She knocked again, but he refused to answer. Mom, let's just go. I don't think it's safe here, her daughter said, pulling her arm. As soon as they turned to leave, they heard him unbolting the door from behind. They turned swiftly. The door opened, and a middle-aged man carrying a lamp raised slightly above his head appeared, trying to see their faces. Yes, he asked, looking at both of them. Good evening, sir, the woman greeted again. Good evening. Where are you from? How may I help you? He inquired. Sir, we were on our way to town, but we missed our way, so we decided to come into this village to maybe find a place to rest our heads until morning. We heard you praying while we were passing, so we decided to stop by. My husband is actually a pastor, and this is my daughter, she explained. Oh, okay, please come in, he said, opening the door wider. They stepped in and were made to sit on a sofa, while he sat on a couch facing them. I'm Pastor Nathan from Bias Estate, and I'm the pastor of the church in this village. I didn't come with my family, though. They are back home but visit whenever the kids are on holiday, and I visit them from time to time too, he introduced himself. You mean people around here don't have problems with you or your religion? The woman asked with curiosity. Not at all, but I heard it's otherwise in some of the villages around here, he replied. Where did you say you were coming from? He questioned, causing her to turn her head and look at her daughter. From the neighboring village, sir. At this time, he said, looking at his wall clock, what about your husband? He's in the neighboring village, sir, but I wouldn't want to talk about that now until I'm through with whatever I want to sort out at home. We were actually on our way home, to Acure, she explained. Oh, you're from Acure? He asked, and she nodded. That night, he offered them food, but they couldn't eat. When he asked why, they told him they were fine. He shared God's words with them, and they prayed together. His house had 3 bedrooms, and he gave them one for the night. As soon as the woman and her daughter stepped in, they sat on the bed and wept, covering their mouths. They couldn't sleep a wink, sitting like that until dawn. The woman held on to her belief that God would perform his wonders somehow. She wasn't weeping because she had lost her husband. She was weeping because of the sufferings her family had endured. There was a gold-colored wall clock on the wall. As soon as it struck 6 a.m., they showered and left the room to inform the pastor they were ready to leave. When he opened his door to see them, his jaw dropped. What is it? Where are you off to this early? He questioned. Sir, thank you for everything. We need to leave now so we can walk to town before the sun rises, she said with a smile. What? Walk? He exclaimed. You mean you want to walk from here all the way to town? Yeah, ma'am, sir, she said shyly, scratching her neck. Is there something you're not telling me? he probed, staring at her as she smiled and looked away. There must be something you're not telling me. Look at both of you. Your eyes are so swollen and red. We wouldn't like to bother you with our story, sir, as it's a very long one. We just want to go home, she said. No, you can't do that. It's too far a distance. Just be patient. Let me make you something to eat, and then we talk. Then I'll drop you off at the park in town. How about that? He suggested. She bowed her head and exhaled. Okay, sir. She nodded and tears began to flow freely down her face. Please, let's talk first, he said, pointing toward his living room. They went into the living room and sat on the couch. Just as she was about to begin explaining what had happened, they heard someone coughing suddenly. They all turned swiftly toward the direction, and the pastor stood up and dashed into the room where the sound was coming from. But I thought, he said. The woman stuttered, looking at her daughter. What's going on? Her daughter asked, looking back at her, and she shook her head. Hallelujah! The pastor screamed suddenly from the room. My mommy! They heard from the room, and the woman stood up immediately. Then someone walked out of the room with a bandage on his head, limping. To their astonishment, it was her son, Sammy. Holy Jesus! The woman exclaimed upon seeing him. Mommy! He called with wide eyes. She instinctively dove forward and grabbed him, hugging him tightly. Her daughter, who was still trying to comprehend the whole thing, stood there with her mouth wide open until Sammy suddenly called her name, jerking her back to reality. Sammy, she called back with wide eyes, rushed to them and gave him a warm hug. What happened to you? Where have you been? She asked, looking into his eyes, and Sammy exhaled. I was whisked away by some people in masks and uniforms and taken to the back of the palace. That's where I discovered they were sent by the king, Sammy began. I was tied to a mango tree and beaten severely. The king had ordered them to torture me and then send me to Dad so that when you and Dad saw me in such a state, you both would have no choice but to leave the village. But during that process, I was beaten unconscious and my body was thrown in the bush. While I was there, I had a dream. Should I say an encounter with Christ? A man came to me dressed in white, inserted 2 fingers in my nostrils, and I jerked back to life. I couldn't even walk when I woke up. I remained at that spot until the early hours of the next day before Pastor Nathan here found me and brought me here. Praise the Lord, his mother said with head bowed, shut eyes and a hand in the air, waving it side to side in worship to God. She then opened her eyes. Thank you, sir, she said to the pastor who was standing beside her son with a broad smile. Thank God, Ma, he replied. Come, let's sit, he said, pointing toward the couches. As soon as they sat, Sammy asked the burning question, Where is Dad? His mother's heart skipped at hearing that, and tears started rolling down again. What's going on? He questioned, looking at her and then his sister, who also sat there crying uncontrollably. Will somebody talk to me, please? He exclaimed, and his mother immediately tried to compose herself. You see, your father is? She stuttered as sweat dripped down from her forehead. Mom, can you please calm down and talk to me? Did something happen? Sammy asked, maintaining an expressionless face. Your father, she said, bursting into tears. Daddy was buried alive, her daughter blurted out suddenly. Jesus, God forbid, he exclaimed, standing up. Holy Moses, the pastor exclaimed with mouth agape. How? When? What happened? He questioned. Just yesterday, she managed to say. That wicked king had him killed. No, tell me it's not true, Sammy said as he broke down in tears, throwing himself on the couch behind him. His mother rushed to him and pulled him to her chest. Wait, you mean he was buried alive? He questioned again, his eyes fixed on his mother. Yes, she replied, sobbing, nodding her head in affirmation. But why? The pastor asked, now sitting at the edge of the couch. For preaching the gospel, the king and his people had him killed. But I don't know why I still have this strong belief that he's not dead, she responded. And what do you intend to do about it? I mean, about what happened, asked the pastor. That's why we need to return home. I need to inform the general overseer and some church elders. Whatever step they choose to take about it, I'm okay with, she said, wiping tears from her face. Wait, you mean we have to wait until we reach Akure before something can be done? No. Come on, this won't do. The kingdom of God suffers violence, and only the violent take it by force, remember? The pastor questioned, and she sighed. See, wait for me. Let me quickly take a shower. We are heading to the police station right away, he said, standing up. Sir, don't you think I should inform the GO of our church first? She asked hesitantly. How can you suggest that? If I let you return home like this without doing anything, even God in heaven will punish me, he replied before leaving for his room. As soon as he left, she looked at her son, then her daughter. But is that the right thing to do? She wondered aloud. Her son sat up and stared into her eyes. His eyes were already red and swollen, his heart beating rapidly. So what's the right thing to do? If you tell the GO now, what else do you think he will do? Just let this pastor do whatever he feels is right, Sammy said between sobs. Wait, where were you when it happened? He asked. Oh my God, she cried out, letting out a piercing scream that made her daughter rush to her side and pat her back. He was buried right before our very eyes, she said, sobbing. Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered. Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered. Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered. O Lord, my God, arise. The pastor sang as he emerged from his room, and they joined him in singing. After a short prayer, they left for the police station. At the station, they demanded to see the DPO, to whom they explained everything. His response was disheartening. I'm so sorry, Pastor and Madam. Our hands are tied in this case, and besides, there's no evidence. How can we be sure that your husband was buried alive by this king? The police don't work that way. Without valid evidence, we cannot take action. And the king is one of those powerful and influential people around here who takes good care of all the uniformed men in this town. We don't even have the courage to drive down to the palace to interrogate him based on hearsay. I'm truly sorry, the DPO explained. The pastor smiled and bowed his head, exhaling deeply before shaking his head. Sir, the grave is there and you can investigate it if you need concrete evidence. What other evidence are we talking about? Just look at my son. The king did this to him. What more do you need? She raged. I'm so sorry, Mom, but our hands are tied, the DPO repeated with a smile. I see. Your hands are tied, right? The pastor asked, rubbing his palms together. I'm sorry, sir, the DPO replied. The pastor stood up and asked them to leave. In the car, he inquired about their church's name and the GO's details. She wept bitterly, unable to believe the injustice from those meant to protect them. Let's return to my place. I know exactly what to do about this case, he said. Sir, shouldn't we just return to Acure and inform everyone about what happened? She managed to say between sobs. No, that's not possible. Let me handle this my way. I know exactly what to do, he insisted. Okay, sir, she replied, wiping her tears. Upon arriving at his place, he dropped them off and drove away, saying he had some matters to attend to. As night fell, they grew increasingly worried when he didn't return. By 9:30 p.m., she approached his neighbors to inform them of his absence. They questioned her identity, with one pointing out she wasn't his wife. After explaining he was helping them, his church members quickly gathered at the house. They repeatedly tried his phone, but it was switched off. Have I implicated this innocent pastor with my problems? She wondered aloud. Some church members left around 11 p.m., while others stayed until morning. She paced the living room anxiously, tears flowing, confused about what to do. Those present tried to calm her, though none understood her predicament. Could the king have him? Did he have an accident? Was he kidnapped? Or are the police involved? The questions tormented her mind. Early the next morning, 5 men knocked on the door. A church member answered, asking their business. They said they were there to see them. The church member closed the door and informed them that some men were asking for the fair woman with 2 children. Her heart skipped a beat. Did they say where they're from? She asked. No, they only asked for the fair woman with 2 children who are here. Ah, she exclaimed. Is something wrong? Someone asked. No, nothing, she replied with a forced smile. When she opened the door and stepped out with her children, they immediately recognized the king's guards. You people again, she challenged. The king summons you and your children to the palace, one announced. For what? She demanded, eyes wide. Do you want to bury us alive too? Just like you did to my husband? Hearing her raised voice, the people inside began emerging one after another. "Madam, is everything all right?" one asked, concerned. "No, nothing is all right. These men are from the neighboring village. They work for the king. They buried my husband alive 2 days ago just because he preached the gospel, and now they're here for my children and me," she explained through tears. "What?" exclaimed one member, while others exchanged worried glances and whispered among themselves. "Well then, return to the palace and tell your king that you met believers of God here who told you that you cannot leave with them," a man declared firmly. At his words, she felt a wave of relief. "We'll have to force them out of here to the palace, even carry them if that's what they want," one guard threatened, approaching and grabbing her arm. Her children and the church members immediately began fighting back. Suddenly, cars drove into the compound, and the guards instantly withdrew. It was the pastor, accompanied by army officers. She and her children rushed to him, asking where he'd been and expressing their worry. He explained that he had traveled out of town to report the case. "You went this far for us. May God Almighty bless you for this. You don't even know us, but you chose to help." "That's so kind of you, sir. Thank you," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Don't worry about that. Please stop crying. God is already handling this case for us," he said, before turning to his church members, who stood grinning widely. "Ah, you thought I had been kidnapped?" he asked, laughing, and the members joined in. "God forbid, sir," one managed to say through their laughter. "It has already been forbidden," the pastor replied with a smile. "Officers, please don't be offended. This is the family of the pastor who was buried alive that I told you about," he explained, gesturing toward them. "Oh, I see. Sorry for your loss," said one of the army officers, who stood tall like the famous Nigerian actor Gentle Jack, fully equipped with his weapon on his shoulder. "Thank you, sir," she responded between sobs. "Where's the palace?" the army officer asked, scanning the area. "In the neighboring village, sir. In fact, these guards are from there. They came saying the king ordered them to bring my children and me to the palace. They were even trying to use force before you arrived," she explained. "Why? Young men, what for?" the pastor demanded. Sorry, sir," one guard stammered, visibly shaking. She noticed him trying to signal his colleagues, but none seemed to understand. The guards attempted to retreat slowly, hands behind their backs, but froze when an army officer cocked his weapon. One guard even wet himself in fear. "You dare come from your village to another to forcibly drag a helpless woman and her children away just because your king summons her. This is unacceptable," an army officer declared, shaking his head. "No, sir, please, it's not like that. I'm usually not like this because I have human feelings, but I don't know about the rest of them. I only followed them here because if I hadn't, the king would have had my head on a platter. Please, my wife just gave birth. Allow me to return home to them, sir, and I promise I will never work in the palace again," the guard who had wet himself said, already in tears. "Just hold each other's hands like that and step into the van. If you try to run or try any silly movement with me, I'll blow off your skull." "Oh, you think this thing we're carrying is fake?" one of the officers said, raising his gun. He fired into the air suddenly, making everyone jerk in fear. "Yee!" screamed the frightened guard, putting his hands on his head. "Now move! Get into the van!" the officer thundered, and the guards rushed toward the van and climbed in. "Shall we go now?" an officer asked, spitting out the toothpick he had in his mouth. "Please give us a few minutes, sir," the pastor said with a smile. "Let's hold hands and pray," he continued, looking at the woman and her children. The church members all held hands as the pastor said a very short prayer. They left the village and drove straight to Jogbo. However, they noticed something strange. Everywhere was quiet and no one was in sight. The army officers drove behind them but had to signal them to stop when they couldn't find even a single soul. The driver of the officers' van stopped, including the other car they came with, and the pastor too had to stop. One of the officers walked up to them and they immediately lowered their windows. "It's like rapture has already taken place in this village," he said, and they all burst into laughter, including the pastor. "I think so. I just pray they had repented before hearing the sound of the trumpet," the pastor teased, and they all laughed again. "I think we should drive down to the palace. Maybe there's something going on there," he added. "Okay, sir," the officer said, then turned swiftly and headed for their own car. They drove into the palace, and all came down, but it was still the same. Not a single person was around. "What's going on?" the woman asked, looking around. The pastor marched forward and checked everywhere but couldn't find anyone. They decided to drive around the village to see if they could find any clue to the sudden disappearance of all the villagers. They followed the road leading to the church, and lo and behold, all the villagers were gathered before the church, pushing each other to gain entrance. "Sir, stop, stop!" the woman screamed suddenly, and the pastor halted. "Did the church send another pastor here?" she asked, already getting down from the car with her children following. Then she started to hear a strange voice. She and her children sprinted toward the church. As soon as the people struggling at the entrance saw them, they made way. There, standing before the church and preaching at the top of his voice, was her husband. The moment she saw him, she screamed his name and fainted. She later woke up in the house, in his arms. Seeing his face when she regained consciousness, she almost dashed out of the house, but he gripped her. "Come on, it's me," he said gently. "How come?" she asked, glancing at him from head to toe with wide eyes, trembling in fear. "I don't know either. I saw myself sitting on the grave last night," he explained. "It's a lie. Pastor, he's a ghost," she cried tearfully to the other pastor. "I'm not, my love. God did it. As Jesus told Mary and Martha that the death of Lazarus was done to glorify the name of the Lord. So did this happen to glorify his name," he said, smiling. The army officers still went ahead and arrested the king, but her husband and the pastor bailed him out and brought him back. A crusade was later held in the village, and almost 99.9% of the people gave their lives to Christ, including the king. The king fell before the altar with his crown on his head, and there he confessed his sins in tears. Who can battle with the Lord? Nobody. The end. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you won't miss any updates. Thank you, and